Good evening and welcome to a long overdue episode of Kink Candid.
Thank you for admitting that.
Yes, my apologies to our listeners. I started a new job and it's kind of been kicking my butt. So this is the first moment we've actually gotten to really record. So here we are. And hopefully now that things are settling in a little more, there will be more regular recordings, but it's so anyway, we have a couple of topics. One we've talked about a little bit before, and one is a little bit new for the show. Both are, as we are wont to do here at Kink Candid, somewhat controversial.
I say we go into new ground first and then cover the old ground.
It works for me. Both are, as I said, a little controversial, but we've never...
Controversial is what we do here, so...
It's kind of our thing. That's how we roll. So the first new ground, as we said, is it boils down to, and we'll discuss this further, obviously, but what it boils down to is submissives are not, in fact, actual children.
No.
Even littles are not, in fact, actual children.
No, that's a whole different thing.
And as such, we do not need to be protected from the big bad evil doms. And more importantly, we do not need to be protected from ourselves.
Also, no. I know a certain redhead who would very quickly take after me with a rolling pin if I tried.
Yeah, I don't think she would appreciate that, like, even a little.
Since I'm less than able to get out of the way, I'd come out of it with bruises.
Yes, it's not going to end well for you.
No.
Mine will tell you not so much the rolling pin part, but that I would object strenuously if you insisted that he needed to protect me from my own desires, because I can tell you exactly where you can go with that attitude.
And how far?
I see this come up a lot, both mostly from doms or wannabe doms. And I don't mean wannabe in that, like, in the insulting way. I mean people who are saying that this is something I want to do, but I haven't done it before.
Right.
I mean that literally as want to be. But
the doms in training, as it were.
Right, exactly. New doms. They get this idea somewhere along the way, and I really don't know where it's coming from, but they get this idea that submissives are these fragile, delicate, childlike creatures that must be protected at all costs from the big bad evil doms of the world and from themselves, because we want things that aren't good for us or okay and things of that nature. And I'm going, excuse me?
This attitude brings up several questions. Because my first question is things that you want, like what, heroin? Because if that's the problem, there are programs for that.
Well, at that point, submission's really not your issue.
Yeah, no.
I saw somebody argue to a sub with depression the other day that they simply needed to surrender their depression to their dom.
And the dom is going to do what with it? Because, okay, I get where the attitude is coming from, but I promise you this: should you surrender your depression to me, I'm going to have no clue what to do with it because I have plenty of my own.
Well, and it's such a bizarre attitude in some ways, because I'm going, I don't know what you expect the dom to do. Like, he can't fix my brain chemistry. That's not actually a thing he can do.
Okay. I'm sure that our listeners will correct me if I'm wrong, as I often am. But this sounds an awful lot to me like an offshoot of the and not to be disrespectful here to any of our religious dominants or submissives, but this sounds an awful lot like to me like an offshoot of the let Jesus take the wheel sort of attitude. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with that particular attitude. But no matter how much you worship your Dom is not Jesus. He is not God. You can surrender anything you want to him, but that doesn't mean he's going to know what to do with it.
Well, and there are many things that our DOMs or subs, as the case may be, can do to help us. We often help each other in this lifestyle. That's something that we do. And there are many things
kind of the whole point.
That you can help your sub with, or you can help your Dom with. There's many things that can be done. But at the end of the day, while some of what we do can be helpful to those of us with mental health disorders, it doesn't actually cure them.
No, it's not a medical treatment.
It just doesn't work that way. Believe me, if it did, I would be thrilled, but it doesn't actually work that way.
You would also be fixed, but no,
right,
your lack of fixedness.
Right. I still have my mental health disorder. It didn't go away.
No.
It doesn't work that way. I see subs come in all the time with this idea that somehow their DOMs are supposed to protect them from themselves. It pops up with, I said this, I never said this was a limit. I said I was okay with it, but if he does that, is he crossing a line? Or I said I was okay with this, and then he did it, but I didn't really want him to. Why didn't he, somehow magically know that I didn't really want that sort of thing? And it's this idea, it boils back down to that same idea that our DOMs are supposed to somehow protect us from ourselves. I've got into a debate about racial lines in DS relationships. For my listeners' education on this matter, I have not been the Dom in an interracial DS relationship. I have, however, been the sub in one. And they are not really any different than any other interracial relationship, per se. But this person wanted to make the argument that if their future minority race submissive said they were okay and wanted to engage in some of the edgier forms of race play, that it was, they would refuse to do it if random strangers on Reddit told them that it had had a bad effect on them because other people's experiences outweighed what a submissive said they wanted or could handle.
Okay, and you've heard me say this. That's not race play, that's racist. I'm sorry, but disbelieving your submissive in what she can or cannot handle simply because she happens to be of a different race and submissive, that's not race play. That's racist. Get help.
And I will tell you that as a submissive myself, I am immensely bothered by this idea that somehow we don't know what we want, or we say we want things that we shouldn't want, or when we say we can handle something or want to engage in a specific type of play, that we don't really know what's good for us, and we need to be protected from ourselves, from, and our big, strong doms need to tell us that even though we say we want this thing and can handle this thing, they are sure that we cannot, and therefore they are protecting us from ourselves and not letting us do that. That is incredibly insulting.
It's insulting, it's patronizing, and please do not.
I am neither a child, nor am I incapable of knowing my own desires. And I'm not going to say that a dom or a sub might think they want to do something, or think they like something, or think they can handle something, and then try it and then discover afterwards you know what, that didn't work for me quite the way that I thought it was going to. I'd like to not do it again.
Yeah, and that's a perfectly valid response to any play situation. You try it isn't what you think it is, and you move on.
You go, you know what, I wanted to try this thing, and then I tried the thing, and I didn't really like the thing, so I'm not going to do the thing anymore.
No,
fine.
We're done.
But I don't need a
no,
dom.
thank you.
No, thank you. I don't need a dom, any dom, to come and tell me, oh, you only think you want to try this thing. You don't really want that thing. That will have a bad effect on you. You don't know my mind and my emotional state or my psyche any better than I do. Absolutely not.
No. And I don't care if your dom happens to be a psychiatric professional. Still no.
And it leads to subs questioning things that they shouldn't be questioning. I said I didn't want to do X, but I was fine with Y. My dom did Y. Is that okay? Is he crossing a line? He can't be crossing a line if you never told him it was a line.
Yeah, no. If you've given permission, he's not crossing a line. He's simply following a predetermined path.
And if it is a line, then it is your responsibility to tell them. And that brings up a side point that has occurred to me, and I would love your thoughts on this, actually. You and I both know that in long-term committed DS relationships, the dominant partner is often capable of reading their submissive pretty well. It's why long-term couples will often tell you they can't recall a time that they needed to safe word, because it just doesn't happen very often, because you guys know us pretty well.
That's kind of the point.
I know mine does. Mine tells, mine gets me better, and he knows when I'm done without me having to tell him. But that being said, I'm finding it's interesting to me that I'm finding that there's this corruption of that thought process, and that's typically a function of, in my experience, committed long-term relationships.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen the very first time you meet someone. It's something that sort of develops as you know each other, but it doesn't just happen sort of immediately upon meeting someone. But because people see these sort of long-term committed relationships where that is the case, there is this perception I find that sub A is engaged in play with Dom B, okay? Sub A and Dom B have not known each other for very long, a few months at max, and they're engaged in some sort of play. Dom says, I want to do X thing. Sub either says okay, or or is asked, is that okay, and says yes, or what have you, indicate some level of consent. But sub later says, I didn't really want that. I wasn't really comfortable with it. And
then why didn't you say so?
Well, that's the first question. But the assumption then comes from other people with, well, if they were any good, if they had any kind of experience, they would have been able to tell and read your nonverbal cues, yada, yada, yada.
No. I may be very prescient where my sub is concerned. I may understand her quite well, but that does not make me, no matter how long I've known her, it does not make me a mind reader. So, can you please not?
And it bothers me because and this again leads back into the subs should be protected from the big bad doms, because, a real dom, a good dom would have known that you didn't really mean yes, even though you said yes.
Yeah, buzz off.
And it's...
Sorry, but
it
no.
concerns me.
It's not the way this works.
because, it's not fair to the dom in question, much less the sub, and it leads to subs feeling like they have been treated poorly or what have you by this dom because, well, he asked what my limits were. I told him blah, 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 limit, but I never said this was a limit, but I didn't really want to do it. And then he did this thing that wasn't on my limits list, but he should have known in some way.
No. I'm back to you. I'm not a mind reader. I don't know any doms who are.
And, and I think it all boils back to this idea that subs are the, precious commodity that needs to be protected from themselves, and that any dom who doesn't immediately know that you didn't really want to do X thing, even though you said you wanted to do X thing.
Right. And before you go any further than that, I'm going to step across the room away from the rolling pin. We've been down this path already.
And, it bothers me because, like I said, it all roots back to the same thing, which is this idea that subs need to be protected because they don't really know what they want. And
if they don't know what they want, then they're open to learning. And we're back to if they try a thing and one or the other, dom or sub, decides that this thing was not actually enjoyable or pleasant, then they are more than welcome to never do that thing again. But expecting one party or the other to magically know that this was going to be a problem, no. This is where talking and communication come into hand.
And and this idea that somehow it's the aftercare discussion all over again, which our listeners will know how I feel about the aftercare discussion.
Here we go.
But
you let her get it. You let her get into her stride.
Yeah, see, now you're in for it. But you'll hear these submissives be like, "Well, I wanted X, Y, and Z for aftercare. We never discussed it, but he didn't do what I wanted. Therefore, he must be a bad dom." And I'm going, well, no, not really, because it just means you have different ideas about what aftercare looks like. And that's okay. But
yeah.
You need to yourself at that point communicate what your thoughts are in terms of what you're after in terms of these sorts of things. Yeah. I wanted, if you want, a few minutes of cuddling, then by all means, that's something you should definitely communicate. If you want to be left the heck alone, then you should communicate that. If you want a blanket and some chocolate, then you should communicate that. But aftercare is something that you're right, and they should be providing that. No. I'm like, no, you should have to negotiate that like anything else. But, and this idea that, and this leads me into my second topic for this evening, which is it's not all about you on either side. One of the debates I saw raging here recently online was related to differing needs as far as aftercare is concerned. Mm-hmm. So, for the purposes of this discussion, we again have sub A and dom B. Sub right. A and dom B are in some sort of DS arrangement. I don't know exactly what the terms of their agreement are, but they have some sort of arrangement.
We should point out that the reason she doesn't know is because this isn't a scenario coming straight out of her head. This is something that comes from people she's communicated with. Right, yes. We're simply protecting names here.
Yeah, it's a protection of privacy, but they sub want X, Y, and Z for aftercare. They want, 20 minutes or whatever of cuddling and discussion and et cetera, et cetera. Okay. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but that's what they want. Okay. problem is that they are engaged in this arrangement with Dom B, and Dom B has specific after scene needs as well. And their needs include sometimes by themselves to sort of decompress and come out of the headspace that is required for the play.
Right.
Which again, nothing inherently wrong with that. The problem then is sub wants aftercare in the way that they need it immediately post-scene. Dom needs 5 or 10 minutes to decompress before being able to provide that.
And trust me when I tell you, waiting quietly 5 or 10 minutes while your Dom catches his breath and figures out that he's back in the world is not going to kill you. As long as, the restraints or whatever have been released, it's not going to kill you. It's not going to put you in danger. You are not going to perspire or expire in the 5 or 10 minutes that it takes him to, find himself again and be able to cope with you.
And my position was, okay, make sure that any immediate physical needs have been met.
And this is back to where we come into, untying or unlocking the bonds.
Yeah. As long as immediate physical needs have been met, then in my opinion, the correct solution to this scenario is to give Dom his 5 or 10 minutes to go sort of decompress and come back to Earth, as it were, and then ask him to provide for you the kind of, cuddling and et cetera that you need at that moment. This seemed to me a fair solution. However,
strangers on the internet disagreed.
Yes, strangers on the internet decidedly disagreed and decided that the Dom was terribly evil and selfish and awful and horrible because they were, in fact, not immediately focused on their subs needs because their subs needs outweighed their own.
No, it's not the way this works.
I strongly disagree. I really do. Because I feel like at that point that both needs are equally important. And, our Doms have their needs for aftercare and decompression after playtime as much as a sub does. And then to say, okay, look, I will make sure that you have, a blanket or what have you that you need at that moment because some subs get very cold immediately post.
It's the sudden drop in blood pressure as your heart rate decreases.
Yeah, and so, you need a blanket, make sure your physical needs are cared for at that moment. Then say, okay, I'm going to take 10 minutes or so to kind of cool off and come down, and then I will come back and we can cuddle and, talk and what have you. This seems totally reasonable to me. And
it seems totally reasonable to me, too. And being the guy on the other side.
This seems like a fair, it's not unreasonable for you to say, hey, I need you to do this for me afterwards, but I also understand that you have needs too, so let's, figure out a way to meet both sets of needs.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of this argument that, he needs to pay attention to her needs first, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, your needs have to come second. And I'm going, well, not necessarily. And then, you've got that kind of thing. And, I've noticed a rather disturbing trend that the minute a submissive identifying person says, I need X, Y, or Z from my Dom, and they are not providing it, it's they should be meeting your needs. They need to be taking care of your needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the minute that same type of question is posed by a dominant individual, then the responses are often very, very different. And it's, oh, you need to be better about meeting your subs' needs, and you need to pay more attention to their needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this...
Can I interject something here? Since you seem to be focused on finding your words. My take on this is that, and you've heard it before, I'm sure, you can't take care of someone else until you can take care of yourself. This is that same situation on a microcosm, basically. I can't take care of what you need until I'm sure that I'm both physically and mentally capable of giving you what you need without hurting you or upsetting you. Well, so yeah, I'm gonna take 5 minutes to unlock the restraints or untie the knots. I'm gonna give you a blanket so you don't freeze to death and go into shock. And then I'm gonna step away for 5 minutes, catch my breath, and remember that I am actually a functioning human being. And then I'll come back and we can cuddle and talk about how the scene went and what went wrong and what went right and what we want to try again. But until I'm certain that I can be what you need, I'm going to need a minute.
And, it boils back to, and this is a thought that was picking at the edge of my brain that I was struggling to find the words for, and this is finally, it has come to me.
There you go.
It's the adage about if you were riding on a plane and they give you the safety speech and they tell you...
Safety lecture.
Yes, when they give you the safety lecture and they tell you about the oxygen mask, they will tell you that if you are a parent, that you should put on your own mask before helping your children.
If you are traveling with small children. That's the way that's that's phrased. If you are traveling with small children, excuse me, I spent years in the surrounded by the airline industry. I'm very familiar with the safety lecture.
But yes, and that's what occurs to me is it's much the same way, in much as I hate to use the terminology because we just got done explaining that children were not, in fact, submissives were not, in fact, children. But the adage is the same. If you do not put on your own oxygen mask, you are not going to be able to breathe enough to put on anybody else's.
Yeah, it's not about children or adult. It's about if you are traveling with someone else whom you are responsible for.
If you do not have a mask on, you're not going to be able to put theirs on.
Exactly.
And so the advice is to put your own mask on first, which is told to you because it is sort of natural to say, I am responsible for this person. I need to put theirs on first. I need to take care of them. But
while you're bothering fussing with their mask, you're going to suffocate.
And so you are told to take care of your own, sort of need.
So say it with us, class. Put your own mask on first.
And which brings me to a point of my final sort of point that I wanted to touch on, which is, again, related to the sort of, it's not all about you. This is for a one-sided relationship. Both parties, all parties, if you are more than two, are important. And they have needs, and those needs are all important. And it is important to remember that it's very easy to get sort of caught up in the I want. I saw a person get very upset the other day online because they had been playing here recently, new dynamic, new arrangement, with a submissive who likes to play much harder than they do.
Mm-hmm.
They are a much more of a masochist than the dominant is a sadist, and push past their own comfort zone to provide the level of impact and pain play that the submissive wanted, resulting in a lot of sort of shrieking and crying and things of that nature, which did not bother the submissive, but was intensely difficult for the dom in question.
Mm-hmm.
Dom in question safe-worded and ended the scene because they could not handle the level of play that was going on at that moment. And this submissive was angry.
Yeah.
That the scene had been ended early.
Mm-hmm.
And because they had talked about it and they had planned it. And as we said earlier, something sounds good on paper sometimes or in your head and doesn't necessarily feel the same way in reality. And consequently was angry about this and insisted that this dom did not have the right or the ability to safe word out of the scene.
Okay, first of all,
safe words were only for subs.
No. He obviously has the ability. He did it. So that proves ability. As far as right, the safe word isn't only and never has only been strictly for the submissive's protection. It's not. And now I'm the one having trouble finding my words. It doesn't have her name on it. It doesn't have the submissive's name on it. I should really stop using gender-specific terms, but I tend to think that way because I'm in a traditional gender dynamic, and I apologize. But the safe word doesn't have the submissive's name on it. It's there. It's a lifeboat that anybody can use.
And while typically, in my experience, doms don't typically use the safe word in the way that a submissive would, by which I mean they don't typically call red or what have you in the same way that we would, because they simply don't need to. They are able to simply say, okay, that's it. I can't do anymore. I'm
done, and we're going to stop. And
that's as far as I'm going. But it amounts to the same thing. Yeah. I have reached my limit and cannot do anymore, and therefore I'm done with this at this point in my my play session. And that being said, it as I said, it amounts to the same thing. It may not be used in quite the same way that a submissive would, because we have to communicate a little more directly in that way, and so that's why we use it that way. But the effect is the same.
Yeah.
And both parties in a scene, all parties, generally speaking, my scenes are only two. So, as we said at the very beginning of King Candid when we first started the show, please do not assume that any terminology that we use here is meant to imply that is the only way. You will hear a lot of both as opposed to all. All of those statements apply to both two-party scenes, two-party relationships, and multiple-party scenes or relationships. Please also assume that when we refer to submissives as she or doms as he, that is simply because all of the main crew here, so to speak, are mostly in male dom, female sub relationships. So That's just what we're used to. It's not meant as a statement that that's the way it should be necessarily. It's just what we're happy to be used to here at the show. So that being said, all parties in a scene, in a play session, have the ability and the right to say, I don't want to do anymore. And
the safe word isn't something that has the sub's name on it or the dom's name on it. It's a lifeboat.
And either one of you can say, okay, the boat is sinking, let's get in the lifeboat.
Yeah.
But it speaks to this sort of deeper issue. When I started in lifestyle, it was very much about interconnectedness. Both as a community, so to speak, and as individuals. The dynamics and arrangements were very much about interconnectedness. There was very much an understanding that subs brought certain things to the table and doms brought other things to the table, and the two together existed in sort of a symbiotic harmony.
Right.
And I still feel that way.
Likewise.
But I am finding a growing subset of the lifestyle that seems to believe it is I want. It's why we get questions about my partner is vanilla, but how can I get them to do the kinky things that I want to do? Or I want X kink, but my partner doesn't. How do I talk them into it? It's why we get the dom shouldn't be able to end the scene early because safe words are only for subs. Or, all these sorts of things boil back down to an inherent, in my opinion, selfishness. It's all about me and what I want. And that is anathema to me in terms of the lifestyle.
Not just you.
Everything that we do at my house, lifestyle-wise in particular, but in general, everything that we do, we say here in my home that one of the reasons that it works, both our relationship and our dynamic and all of these things, one of the reasons it works is because I spend a lot of my time and a lot of my focus and energy on what will make him happy and vice versa. And it wouldn't work if we were both thinking about our own desires solely rather than thinking about the other person. It only works because I think, oh, he would like this, or he needs this, or he wants this, and he thinks exactly the same way about me.
Yeah.
And so, yes, his aftercare needs are just as important as mine. His ability to safe word out and end a scene is just as valid as mine. His desires matter just as much as mine. And no matter how much I may want to do something, two things are true. If I say I want to do something, two things remain true at that point. One, I do not have a right to push him into doing it if he does not want to do it.
No.
And two, he does not have the right to say to me, you don't want that, or shouldn't want that. He has the right to say to me, I don't want that, but not to tell me that he's going to protect me from myself and that I don't actually want this thing, because I know what I want as much as any of us do.
Yeah, there you go.
I know my own desires as well as any of us do, and they change over time. We've talked about that on the show here a lot. Our dynamic has shifted and changed several times, actually, over the time that we've been together, just because we grow, we age, different life stages and various other circumstances sort of necessitate that. But if I say I want to try X thing, the only question that he has the only question he should be asking himself is, do I want to try that?
Yeah.
And for all of my especially submissive listeners out there, and Doms, this goes for you guys too, but it's particularly aimed at the submissives out there. If you want to do some activity, something that has struck your fancy, and you and your partner both agree that this is something you want to try, that is literally the only thing that determines whether it is okay to do.
Yeah.
You obviously should do your research on safety. Please stop telling me that things are basically vanilla and don't require any, safety considerations, because that drives me up a wall, but that's another episode. But is X thing okay? Do you want to do it, and does your partner want to do it? Yes? Then it's okay. Please don't let the world or the community or any other person out there tell you that you need other people's approval as to whether it's okay for you to do this thing that you want to do and your dom wants to do. As long as you and your partner want to do it, that makes it okay.
Yeah.
And no one should be telling you otherwise.
Short of a medical professional.
Right. Sort of bad. If there are health issues or safety concerns that make it unwise. But no stranger on the internet, no person at a munch, no whatever should be able to tell you, oh, you want to. Oh, this is one that came up. We had a discussion about this today, so we'll use it for the purposes of discussion. The face slapping kink.
Mm-hmm.
This is a thing we don't do at my house. It would do bad things to my brain. It would do bad things to my dom's brain. So we don't do it. But other people do. Is it okay for your dom to slap you in the face? Does your dom want to slap you in the face? Yes. Okay. Do you want to be slapped in the face? Yes. Then it's okay. It's the only question that needs to be asked.
Do your research. Make sure you know how to do it safely, and then have fun.
It hurts my heart as a submissive to see subs questioning themselves on that level. Well, I want to do this, and my dom wants to do it too, but is that okay? Well, yeah, it's okay. I may tell you you should probably research X, Y, and Z if it's something that I'm experienced with and you're not, because I may know that there are some safety issues that you may want to consider. Choking is one that comes up a lot. I want to try choking, and so does my dom. Is that okay? Well, yes, it's okay that you want to try it. There's nothing wrong with that. However, you may want to look into the difference between air choking and blood choking, and there's a number of safety issues that come up there that you want to consider. But is it okay? Yeah, it's okay. Do you? It's another favorite expression.
Have fun while you're doing it.
Another favorite expression in my house. Do you, boo-boo? Do you? There are lots of kinks out there that I'm not into. But far be it from me. Do your thing. Whatever makes you happy. As long as you're consenting, and like I said, it's why I don't subscribe to the safe, sane, consensual argument. I am a RAC proponent at my house, risk-aware consensual kink. As long as you are consenting to it and you are aware of the risks and have taken steps to mitigate them, by all means, kink away. So on that note, I think we'll wrap up here, but
sounds good.
I wanted to kind of get that stuff out there, and so we're going to try, I think, to record again next week, assuming I do not take any more serious injuries at my job.
Sounds like a plan.
So we will be back next week, if all goes according to plan, with another episode. We'll post something, one of us will, during the week as to kind of what we're going to talk about once we sort of sort that out amongst ourselves. And until then, as one of my favorite mods on Reddit says, do ghastly things to lovely people.
As always, be safe out there.